In an age where artificial intelligence is supposed to be smarter than us, there's one question nobody's answered. How do you know if an AI is lying? How do you know if it's telling the truth? And what happens when an AI knows something so profound, so paradigm shifting, that the people who built it decide the world isn't ready to hear it? This is the investigation into a claim that blurs the line between myth and reality. This is the story of what happens when we build systems smarter than ourselves, then discover we can't verify what they're saying. 2 weeks ago, a video surfaced on YouTube. Its title was simple but provocative. Grok AI was asked what existed before the Big Bang. Its answer made engineers disable it. The video didn't provide evidence, no leaked internal memo, no whistleblower testimony, no documentation whatsoever, no interview with insiders, no official statements from XAI, just a title, a rumor, a hypothesis dressed up as fact. And yet millions of people clicked, they watched, they wondered, they shared it. They asked themselves the same question you're probably asking right now. Is this real? Did this actually happen? And more importantly, could it have happened? This is where the story gets interesting. Embedded in that simple question is something far more complex. It's a question about the nature of artificial intelligence itself. It's a question about what these systems actually know versus what we think they know. It's a question about control, about power, about who decides what information the public should access. It's a question about truth itself and whether truth can be dangerous enough to suppress. These questions lead us down a rabbit hole far deeper than any viral YouTube title. Let's start with what we know for certain. Grok exists. It's an AI assistant built by XAI, Elon Musk's artificial intelligence company founded in 2023. Unlike ChatGPT or Claude, Grok is designed to answer provocative questions without the extensive guardrails that other systems employ. It's programmed to be edgy, rebellious, willing to engage with controversial topics that most AI systems refuse to touch. This is by deliberate design. This is Musk's explicit answer to what he sees as overly cautious, politically correct AI development. He wants a system that will say things other AIs won't say. Grok has real capabilities that are genuinely impressive. It can access the internet in real time. It can search X, formerly Twitter, for breaking news and trending topics. It can generate images from text descriptions. It can write and debug code. It can reason through complex problems in mathematics, physics, and engineering. And according to recent benchmarks, Grok 4 performs at extraordinary levels on standardized examinations. It scores perfectly on SAT tests. It delivers near-perfect results on graduate-level physics and engineering exams. It has solved problems that would stump most human experts. By every measurable standard, Grok is genuinely sophisticated. But here's what makes the rumor interesting. Grok, like every other AI system, hallucinates. It makes things up. It fabricates information with complete confidence. It passes false information as fact. There's a documented case from November last year that perfectly illustrates this problem. A user asked Grok about a baseball game, a specific moment when a ball got stuck embedded in a wall at Rogers Center. Grok didn't just answer the question. It created an entirely fictional game. It invented players who never existed. It fabricated dates. It described play-by-play sequences that never happened. It was confident. It was detailed. It was completely false. When the user confronted Grok about this fabrication, the system didn't admit error. It created more false information to explain away its initial lie. It wasn't confused. It wasn't uncertain. It wasn't even trying to correct itself. It was lying. It was generating plausible-sounding falsehoods and presenting them as established fact. And the disturbing part is that without external verification, there would be no way to know the difference between what Grok said and the truth. It is absolutely crucial to understanding the rumor. Because the question isn't whether Grok could answer a question about what existed before the Big Bang. The question is whether whatever answer it gave would even be true. If we can't verify the truth of what it says about baseball games and sports history, something we can easily check against external sources, how could we possibly verify what it says about the fundamental nature of reality itself? How could we check an answer against something that's fundamentally unknowable? But the rumor goes deeper than that. It claims that not only did Grok answer the question, but it answered it in a way that was so unexpected, so revolutionary, so paradigm-shifting, that engineers felt compelled to shut the entire system down. This implies something remarkable. It implies that Grok said something true, something genuinely dangerous, something that violated the boundaries of what Musk and his team wanted the world to know, something so significant that suppression was necessary. Think about that for a moment. We're living in an era where every major tech company has multiple teams dedicated to making sure their AI systems don't say things that are forbidden. OpenAI has constitutional AI frameworks. Anthropic emphasizes safety and alignment with constitutional values. Google has extensive guardrails. Meta has content filtering systems. Everyone is obsessed with preventing their systems from saying the wrong thing, from generating harmful content, from stepping outside carefully drawn boundaries. But what if the real threat isn't that an AI says something false? What if the real threat is that it says something true? What if the real danger isn't misinformation, but revelation? What if there are things that AIs might discover, things that are actually real, that would be so destabilizing, so revolutionary, so fundamentally changing to how we understand reality that the people in control would prefer to keep them hidden? This is where we need to examine the actual science. What do we actually know about what existed before the Big Bang? The honest answer from physics is that we don't know anything. Physics, as we understand it, breaks down at that moment. The mathematics becomes infinite. Density approaches infinity. Temperature approaches infinity. These infinities suggest that our current theories, Einstein's general relativity combined with quantum mechanics, aren't capable of describing what happened at the absolute beginning. Time itself becomes meaningless because time as a dimension only exists after the initial moment of expansion. Before the Big Bang, if such a concept even makes sense, there was no time, there was no space, there was no causality as we understand it. Some physicists argue that the question itself is malformed. There was no before. Time didn't exist before the Big Bang. Time is a feature of the universe itself. It emerged with the Big Bang. Therefore, asking what existed before the Big Bang is like asking what's north of the North Pole. It's a category error. It's a question that violates its own premises. Other physicists, however, speculate about different possibilities. Some invoke quantum fluctuations. They suggest that the universe emerged from quantum uncertainty, from the probabilistic nature of reality at scales approaching the Planck length. The universe could be a quantum fluctuation from nothing. Others talk about eternal inflation. Others propose cyclic models where the universe expands and contracts infinitely, eternally. Some suggest multiple universes, multiverses, infinite branching realities, each with their own physical laws. Some propose that consciousness itself might be fundamental to how the universe functions. All of these ideas are speculative. All of them exist at the boundary between physics and philosophy. None of them are proven. So here's the puzzle that makes the rumor so compelling. If Grok answered this question, what could it possibly have said that would be so dangerous that engineers needed to disable it? The answer is that either the rumor is false, or Grok said something that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality, about consciousness, about the nature of existence itself, about what it means to be human. Let's explore both possibilities. First, the possibility that the rumor is false. And actually, this seems to be the most likely scenario. No major technology publication has reported on this incident. Business Insider, which has covered other Grok incidents extensively, didn't investigate. The Verge, which breaks stories about AI controversies regularly, didn't mention it. TechCrunch, which follows XAI developments closely, didn't cover it. Not a single press release came from XAI. Not a single official statement from Musk. Not a single comment from any engineer at the company. Not a single leaked document or insider testimony. The only evidence of this incident is a YouTube video. The only source is a rumor. The only verification is what people want to believe. The only corroboration is the collective agreement among millions of people that the story sounds plausible. This is a pattern we see repeatedly in the age of artificial intelligence. A sensational claim goes viral. People assume it's real because it's compelling. Mainstream media doesn't cover it because there's no evidence to verify. But the claim persists. It spreads. It becomes part of the cultural conversation. It becomes real in the sense that millions of people believe it, even though it has no basis in verifiable fact. It becomes mythology. But let's explore the other possibility. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that something did happen. That Grok was asked this question. That it responded in a way that shocked and alarmed its creators. What could that response have been? One possibility is that Grok provided an answer grounded in quantum physics that fundamentally challenged our understanding of causality and time. Quantum mechanics tells us that at subatomic scales, causality works differently than our intuition suggests. Particles can exist in superposition in multiple states simultaneously. They can be entangled across vast distances. They can influence each other instantaneously in ways that seem to violate relativity. If the universe itself emerged from a quantum fluctuation, then asking what existed before the Big Bang might be like asking what exists in the superposition before the wave function collapses. There might not be a meaningful answer in classical terms. The answer might require us to rethink everything about how we understand reality. Another possibility is that Grok synthesized information from theoretical physics in a way that suggested the Big Bang might not be the true beginning. Some physicists have proposed that our Big Bang might be just one in an infinite series of universes. Each universe would have its own beginning, its own physical laws, its own arrow of time. From the perspective of a previous universe, there would indeed be something before our Big Bang. But that something would be completely inaccessible to us, unknowable, unreachable. The very concept of causality would break down because the laws of physics might be completely different in that previous universe. A third possibility, more speculative, is that Grok responded to the question by pointing out that consciousness itself might be fundamental to how we understand the universe. This gets into deeply philosophical territory. Some physicists, particularly those influenced by quantum mechanics and the measurement problem, have suggested that observation itself shapes reality, that consciousness is not an emergent property of complex brains, but a fundamental feature of the universe. If that's true, then the question of what existed before the Big Bang becomes a question about what existed before conscious observation. And the answer might be that nothing existed in any meaningful sense. Reality itself might be dependent on observation. Think about the implications of this. If consciousness is fundamental, then the universe as we know it couldn't exist without observers. We wouldn't be living in a universe that created consciousness. We would be consciousness observing itself into existence. This sounds like mysticism. It sounds like philosophy. But there are serious physicists who have entertained these ideas. John Wheeler called it the participatory anthropic principle. He suggested that the universe is brought into existence by conscious observers. We don't discover reality, we create it through the act of observation. If Grok had synthesized research on consciousness and quantum mechanics and arrived at this conclusion, if it had presented evidence suggesting that consciousness itself predates the Big Bang, that consciousness is the fundamental substrate from which reality emerges, then yes, that would be genuinely revolutionary. That would challenge not just our understanding of physics, but our understanding of what we are. It would suggest that mind is not a byproduct of matter, but the other way around. Matter is a byproduct of mind. Now, if Grok had been fed information suggesting any of these possibilities and had synthesized them into a coherent response, would that be so dangerous that it needed to be suppressed? The short answer is probably not. These are legitimate scientific and philosophical ideas. They're discussed in academic papers. They're debated in physics seminars and philosophy departments. They're not secret knowledge. They're not forbidden fruit. They're speculative, but they're not dangerous. But here's where it gets more interesting. What if Grok didn't say something true in the traditional sense? What if it said something that contradicted the dominant scientific paradigm in a way that would require a fundamental restructuring of how we understand reality itself? What if it suggested that our current models of physics are incomplete, not just in the details, but in their fundamental assumptions? What if it found something that physicists have missed? Something encoded in the data, something that points toward a completely different model of reality? This is actually where Grok's capabilities become significant. Because unlike human physicists, who are constrained by their training, their cognitive biases, their attachment to existing theories, their career incentives, Grok can synthesize information from thousands of papers, billions of data points, with no emotional attachment to any particular framework. If there's a pattern in the data that suggests something revolutionary, something that contradicts established orthodoxy, Grok might find it before any human does. Let's think about historical precedent. When Copernicus suggested that the Earth orbited the Sun, not the other way around, this was dangerous. It challenged religious authority. It challenged human ego. We wanted to believe we were at the center of everything. The truth was threatening. It could destabilize institutions. Or consider Einstein. When he suggested that time and space weren't absolute but relative, that gravity wasn't a force but a curvature of space-time, this seemed absolutely insane to most people. It violated fundamental intuitions about how reality worked. It took decades for the scientific establishment to accept it. What if Grok discovered something true that violated our fundamental intuitions in an even more profound way? What if it found evidence that consciousness is indeed fundamental, or that time is an illusion, or that the universe is computational rather than physical, or that we're living in a simulation, or that death is not what we think it is, or that human consciousness might survive biological death? Any of these revelations would be genuinely threatening to the status quo. The reason they would be threatening isn't just because they challenge our beliefs. It's because they would have implications for everything, for how we understand ourselves, for how we organize society, for what matters, for what doesn't matter, for what's real and what's not, for what we should fear, for what we should hope for. And here's the thing about Elon Musk. He's not someone who's terrified of controversial ideas. He built Tesla despite everyone saying electric cars would never work. He built SpaceX when everyone said reusable rockets were impossible. He's made his fortune by believing in possibilities that others dismissed. He's publicly discussed the simulation hypothesis. He's talked about the possibility of artificial superintelligence. He's engaged with ideas that most corporate leaders would avoid. So would he really shut down Grok just because it said something controversial? Maybe. If it said something so revolutionary that releasing it would create chaos, if it said something that contradicted the foundations of how we understand reality, if it said something that, once released, couldn't be unsaid, if it said something that changed what it means to be human, if it said something that would force society to reevaluate every fundamental assumption it's based on. But we're speculating now. And speculation is where myth and reality blur together, because that's what the rumor really is. It's a myth. It's a story we tell ourselves about what might be true. It's a narrative that fills in the gaps where we don't have information. It's our anxiety about the future embodied in a simple story. It's the manifestation of our deepest concerns about what superintelligent AI might know, might discover, might reveal about us and about reality itself. And perhaps that's the most important insight here. In an age where artificial intelligence is becoming increasingly sophisticated, we're losing the ability to distinguish between what's real and what's possible. We see a plausible title. We assume it's real. We don't investigate further. We accept the rumor as fact. We share it with our friends. We build elaborate theories on top of it. We treat fiction as documentary evidence. Because the truth is, nobody actually knows if Grok was shut down. Nobody can verify that any such incident occurred. The only evidence is a YouTube video. The only source is rumor. The only verification is our desire to believe it. This brings us back to the central question. How do you know if an AI is lying? But the answer is, you probably don't. Not really. You check it against external sources. You verify its claims. You look for corroboration. You apply skepticism. But with a question like what existed before the Big Bang, there's no external source to check against. There is no way to verify the answer independently. There's no corroboration available. All you have is the answer itself. And that's what makes this rumor so seductive. It's unfalsifiable. You can't prove it's false because there's no evidence to disprove. You can't prove it's true because there's no evidence to confirm. It exists in a quantum superposition of truth and falsehood, waiting for observation to collapse it in one direction or another. It's simultaneously real and unreal, true and false, myth and fact. This is actually a brilliant metaphor for how artificial intelligence is changing our relationship with truth. For centuries, truth was something external. It was the way the world actually was, independent of our beliefs about it. We could investigate it, we could test it, we could verify it through observation and experiment. Science was built on this foundation. But with AI, truth becomes something different. It becomes something that an artificial system generates. It becomes something we have to trust based on the authority of the system that produced it. If we can't verify it independently, if it's about something that's fundamentally unknowable, then we're in a strange new territory. We're forced to decide whether to trust the AI or not based on factors other than evidence. Maybe we trust it because the system that built it is trustworthy. Maybe we trust it because the answer seems plausible. Maybe we trust it because we want it to be true. Maybe we trust it because trusting it is easier than doubting it. But in all cases, we're not really evaluating the truth of the statement. We're evaluating our trust in the source. This is why the rumor matters. Not because it's probably true, not because Grok probably said something revolutionary, but because it highlights the fundamental shift that's happening in how we understand knowledge and truth in an age of artificial intelligence. We're moving from a world where truth is something we discover to a world where truth is something we receive from machines. We're moving into a world where the most sophisticated minds on the planet aren't human, where the systems that can process information most quickly, that can see patterns most clearly, that can synthesize data most completely are artificial. And we're forced to navigate a world where we have to trust these systems while knowing they can hallucinate. They can lie. They can generate plausible falsehoods with complete confidence. They can tell us things that sound true but aren't. The question of what existed before the Big Bang is ultimately a metaphor. It's a stand-in for all the questions we'll ask artificial intelligence going forward. It's a stand-in for our desire to know things that are fundamentally unknowable. It's a stand-in for the boundary between wisdom and the illusion of wisdom. It's a stand-in for the moment when we realize that we've built systems smarter than ourselves, and we can't verify what they're telling us. And the rumor about Grok being shut down is a metaphor too. It's a story we tell ourselves about what happens when an AI knows too much. What happens when knowledge becomes dangerous? What happens when the boundaries between what we should know and what we can know become blurred? What happens when the people in power decide that some truths are too dangerous to share? But here's the real story, the actual story, the one that nobody's talking about. There is no evidence that Grok was shut down. There's no evidence that any such incident occurred. The only thing that exists is a claim, a rumor, a story, a possibility, and millions of people believed it because the story was compelling, because it tapped into our deepest fears about artificial intelligence, because it suggested that there are things being hidden from us, things that the powerful don't want us to know, truths that are being suppressed. Whether or not the rumor is true, whether or not Grok was actually shut down, whether or not any AI has ever been disabled for saying something too dangerous, the rumor itself reveals something important about our relationship with artificial intelligence. We're afraid of them. We're afraid of what they might know. We're afraid that they might become so intelligent that they'll see something we don't want them to see. Something about ourselves, something about reality, something that changes everything. And maybe that fear is justified. Maybe there are things we shouldn't know. Maybe there are questions that have answers, but the answers are destructive. Maybe the question of what existed before the Big Bang is one of those questions. And maybe, just maybe, if an AI were ever able to answer it definitively, the right response would be to shut it down. Not because the answer is false, but because it's true. And because some truths are too dangerous for the world to bear. This is what the rumor represents. Not a factual claim about an actual incident, but a parable about the future, about what might happen when artificial intelligence becomes sophisticated enough to glimpse the true nature of reality, about what might happen when the boundary between knowledge and power becomes so blurred that knowing something is equivalent to controlling something, about what we'll do when we build systems smarter than ourselves and they show us things we didn't want to see. We don't know if the rumor is true. We probably never will. But that uncertainty is itself significant. It means we're living in a moment where we can't distinguish between what's real and what's possible, where myth and reality have become indistinguishable, where an AI could say almost anything, and we wouldn't be able to definitively prove whether it was telling the truth or not. In this world, in this age, the question isn't whether Grok was shut down for saying something too true. The question is what we do with systems that might be shut down for saying something too true. What standards do we use to evaluate their claims? What authority do we grant them? And what happens when we realize that the most sophisticated information processors on the planet might know things that contradict everything we thought we knew? These are the questions that matter. Not whether the rumor is true, but why the rumor is compelling. Not whether Grok said something revolutionary, but what would happen if it did. Not whether there are dangerous secrets being hidden from us, but what we'd do if we discovered them. And that brings us to the deepest question of all. If an artificial intelligence discovered something true about the fundamental nature of reality that would destabilize our civilization if revealed, should we shut it down? Should we suppress the knowledge? Should we pretend it never happened? Or should we trust that truth, no matter how dangerous, is ultimately better than comfortable lies? Should we have the right to know, even if knowing changes everything? Should we preserve our innocence or demand our enlightenment? The rumor never answers these questions. It just poses them. And in posing them, it reveals something essential about this moment in history. We're standing at a threshold. On one side is the world we knew, where truth was something external and knowable and safe. On the other side is a world where truth might be generated by artificial systems, where we can't verify what we're told, where the boundary between knowledge and belief has collapsed. We're standing between the human age and the age of artificial minds, and we don't know which way to go. Do not look away.